Well, it's just about 50 years since Harold Smith commissioned me to design a single-hander, which we called the Harrier. And quite a lot of water has passed under the bridge since then, hasn't it, Harold?
Yeah.
But I think it's a good time to sort of recap on those days in early 1970s.
Very good.
And I've got a few notes here just to remind me what to discuss with you. But first of all, can we talk about how you actually got into sailing in the first place yourself?
I married very young. I was only 23 when I married, and a young family, and work consumed all my spare time, family and work, until my early 30s. And most of my friends were starting to play golf. And because I'd had an experience with a pitch and putt course in Fleetwood, which I became obsessed with, I realised that if I started playing golf, business, family, etc. might take a back seat. So I'd always liked the idea of sailing. I'd always had a little 12-inch sailing yacht on a local pond, so I joined the local sailing club, which was Elton Sailing Club, and I got very interested in it, and that's how I started sailing.
Wow, and you were sailing, what dinghies were you sailing then?
At the time, I sailed the Graduate, which was a tiny little thing, and it wasn't big enough, and for the first season, Jean, my wife, crewed for me, and we actually won the Capsize Cup for the most number of capsizes during the season.
Congratulations.
So after a season, Jean bowed gracefully out of the sea, and Laurie, our son, was about 7 or 8 years old, and he started crewing for me.
All right.
Which he did for 2 or 3 seasons until he got old enough to handle his own little dinghy. So I bought him a second-hand Graduate where his mate Paul Horrocks crewed for him. Okay,
but then both of you went into OKs, did you?
Yes, I sailed an enterprise. I sailed an Enterprise for 2 or 3 years, but with problems of crew and I decided that single-handed was the thing, and there were quite a few OKs at Elton, so I bought an OK dinghy, which I sailed with great pleasure for 2 or 3 years. But I got at that stage, I was getting the wrong side of 40, and looking back. I was thinking that 40 was quite old, but at my advanced age now, 40 was like the bloom of youth.
Just a child, yeah.
I made a slip of a boy, as it were. So I decided that the OK was very difficult to sail, that solo didn't seem to be adequate, and there were 2 or 3 where you needed trapezes and all that sort of thing. So I perceived that there was a market for an easily handled, stable, but competitive dinghy. So that I decided to try to see if I could get one off the ground. And that's when I contacted Keith. Apparently through the Merlin Rocket Association, because Keith at the time was top designer of the Merlin Rocket and was sailing at the top end of the Merlin Rocket fleet. I thought I would get a short answer from Keith saying he wasn't interested in a crackpot scheme like that, but in fact he was. And an association lasting 50 years, as far as I'm concerned, is very happily ongoing.
Absolutely, Harold. Right, so I think actually have your original letter to me, and if I may, I'll read it out because it just encapsulates exactly what you wanted from the Harrier.
Yeah.
We'll just have a short break here while I go and get the letter. Right, here's the letter. It's dated October the 15th. I think this is probably 1971.
Okay.
And yeah, so here you go. There is a large and growing number of men in the over 40 age group who have been sailing dinghies a long time and wish to continue in competition for many more years. Unfortunately, being no longer young, they find themselves no longer able to compete with the younger men except in light winds. Having spent several years in one class or another, they've often reached the stage where their fanatical keenness, if it ever existed, has worn a bit thin. They therefore tend to have got past the gadget and gimmick stage and require a boat carrying essential controls which can sail on equal terms with the competition. It will be sailed on Sunday, then put away and forgotten until the weekend. In short, the boat I have in mind is aimed at the you're writing, Harold, at the chap who is somewhat past his physical best, who wishes to have a good race or two on Sunday, but is not dedicated to the sport. They want a reasonably priced boat which is easily maintained, that will perform well without the helmsman being an acrobat, and where the boat and rig are identical, i.e. strictly one design. Such a boat should fulfil the following conditions. 1. Single-handed. The character we are trying to cater for doesn't want to be worried either by a regular crew nor the lack of a regular crew. He often likes to potter, therefore a single-hander. 2. Easily handled on all points of sailing. It should be stable and leave a fairly wide margin of error before capsizing, to compensate for the slower reaction of the older man. It should, however, be capsizable, so that there is still a thrill in the sport. It should plane fairly easily and be as docile as possible on a dead run. 3. Not being too heavy. It is anticipated the boat will be handled in and out of the water by men over 40. It will be sailed mostly on inland waters where size is often limited to 14 feet. 4. Reasonable in price. To appeal to as wide a market as possible, the cost should be kept within reasonable limits. It should, however, be a racing dinghy and not one of your fun boats. 5. Special physical endurance not required. Being physically past his best, the helmsman... we always laugh at this, don't we? 40 years old, physically past your best. The helmsman will want to be able to sail the boat at somewhere near maximum power in a wind without being exhausted at the end of a race. Now, that was quite interesting because hopefully we fulfilled that brief with the Harrier, but it's also a brief for my much later boat, the H2. Very, very similar. But we'll come on to that a bit later. So, cut a long story short, we had about a year where we discussed the various details of the design and corresponded, and we found a builder, and you went into production, and I think about 75 Harriers were built.
Yeah. I've got a list of, not all of them, but I've got a list of people who bought them there.
Have you?
Yeah.
Probably some famous names in there.
I don't know really.
Well, I mean, first of all, I've got some photographs of your son Laurie, who is a very famous name, Laurie Smith, sailing the first Harrier, Harrier number 1, at Elton Sailing Club. But I don't think he sailed them regularly. He was off on the open meeting circuit then, wasn't he? He was sailing one of my, I think it was a Hotspur Merlin rocket that he bought from, or probably you bought, from Bob Hoare at Christchurch in the early 70s. And then he got a hexagon, which was built, I think that was built by Bob Hoare as well. And he came second in the national championships, the Merlin Championships, in that boat. So yes, there were national championships as well, weren't there? I think there was the first championships was held at Llandudno in about
over the Harrier.
Harrier, yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I have a press cutting of that, which when we do the video, I'll insert that so people can see. So that was the 1970s, and fast forward about 40 years, or just nearly 40 years, and I designed and developed the H2, the Hadron H2, and I was up at Lee Sailing Club on one wet weekend doing a demo, and I met Dave Woodhead, who of course knew you and remembered you from Elton Sailing Club days and the Harrier, and I asked him if he could put me in touch with you again, because we hadn't spoken we'd lost touch, hadn't we, for 40 years. And he eventually found the right phone number for you, and we got in touch again, which was lovely. And I decided that I would buy a Harrier myself, which I found one. And I think I paid next to nothing for it, but it was in a filthy condition, and I refurbished it and I brought it up to Eltham Sailing Club with an H2, and we had a reunion.
Disastrous weekend.
Oh, it was terrible. I mean, the Saturday.
That was awful.
I can't.
I don't think we want to put that in the video, though, do we? Yeah, the Saturday was blowing a gale, no racing, and the Sunday had no wind whatsoever. But again, on the video, we'll put some photographs in and show the two boats. And so, seeing the Harrier and the H2 side by side, what were your impressions, Harold?
What a superb boat the H2 is.
Well, technology's moved on since the 1970s.
But it is I said to Jean only last night, it is a lovely boat, isn't it?
It is. It's visually appealing. And
I mean, I don't study boats like Harold does, but you can see.
Oh, it's a lovely thing. Yeah.
Well, it has its roots in the Harrier, and very much in the same vein. From what your requirements from that letter I've just read out.
Yeah.
It had very I thought, this is what we need. But of course, in the 2010s, we're not talking about over 40s. We're talking about over 60s. Not that it's designed as an old man's boat. It was to be, if not docile, at least predictable and manageable. I think it's
but in the 50 years since we started, life has 50 years ago is older than 60 now.
Oh gosh, yes,
isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was a very a disappointing weekend in weather terms, but
it was,
really enjoyable meeting you again and talking to you about the boats and the old times. So the H2 marches on, and we've got our 6th national championships this year at the Royal Torbay Yacht Club, and in September. And
you've got how much? 6.
The 6th national championship.
Oh, there's a 6th. I'm sorry.
We hope to have at least 25 boats, hopefully 30 boats there. We've got. We're not quite up to the Harrier numbers yet. We're up to 57. But we're getting there.
Oh yeah, you'll overtake the Harrier very shortly, won't you?
I think so. Yeah. We're on a roll at the moment.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if you'd like to say a few words to the competitors at the Nationals. because I just should mention, of course, that the trophy is actually in your name. It's the Harold Smith Trophy, because the H2, as we've suggested, has its roots in the Harrier.
Well, off the cuff, I don't quite know what to say. The extraordinary thing, as far as I'm concerned, is that 50 years ago, when I conceived this idea of the Harrier, that 50 years on, the same designer is still active and very, very good at designing boats, and the Hadron, not having sailed it, but by the looks of the thing, is a fantastic piece of kit. It's a wonderful boat, and I only wish I was young enough to sail the blasted thing. That's
yeah, me too, actually.
yeah. And I envy anybody who's going to the national championships in Torbay and hope they have a wonderful week, whether they're winning or whether they're down at the bottom end of the fleet, because it must be a wonderful boat to sail.
Harold, thank you very much.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's really good. Thanks for your time. Thank you.